come. Just to let you know that this is going to be recorded so that we can share it with the people that haven't been able to make it today. Just give me a moment and I will get this up and running. Right, there we go. So thank you for coming today. Somebody else coming in. Today, basically the meeting we're doing today is to talk through what makes a good WIDA entry and what makes a not so good WIDA entry. We're running this as a result of people asking us to. So let's get started. So you know my name, I'm Kylie Leonard. I'm the Associate Publisher at Australian Defence Magazine. And I'm going to quickly run through all the information that we have available for you and hopefully get to the end and have plenty of time for questions. You should be able to type some questions into the Q&A and Ewan's online and he's going to help me with answering those and we'll go through them all at the end. As I said, this is going to be recorded and we'll put the link up on our website, probably on our YouTube channel as soon as we can. Let's start off with just the general entry questions. So for this year, for the first time ever, there will be a series of general questions that everybody answers, and then there'll be a series of questions that are specific to the category that you've chosen to nominate in. This sounds a bit silly, but make sure you get the full time and the role of the nominated individual correct. We have had cases where just before we've gone to print trophies, the nominated person has come back saying, actually, that's not really my name. Can you change it? So please double check to make sure that you have them all correct. Don't be as detailed as you possibly can when you're talking about their role. Don't give us a position description because that really doesn't tell us what the person does. I know my position description bears absolutely no relationship to what I actually do. We understand that there are people that have security concerns and they can't tell us exactly what they do. We sort of get that, but as much detail as you possibly can, and position descriptions make for really boring reading. We're after entries that really jump out from the get-go and say, look at this, this is amazing. Okay, what did the nominee achieve in 2022? This is the big reason that a lot of entries get relegated at the first go. They give us a lifetime achievement description of the person and why they may be really, really amazing. These are annual awards, so we really, really need their achievements to be in that year that we're looking at, in which case was last year, which is 2022. Yeah, as I said, this is what makes you go, wow, why are you nominating? What have they done? What made them so amazing? Okay. How has the person been, how's the woman been a role model? What has she done? How is with inside defence industry? How has what they've done stood out to you as encouraging other women and other people to become involved in what we do? Right, and this is a chance to talk about things outside defence. So have they run the local softball team? Have they gone out at work at homeless shelters? This is the stuff that could be, it could also be stuff with inside defence, like with defence recruiting, with the, that's sort of veterans affairs, things like that. That's the sort of stuff we're after in there. Again, be specific. Okay. Now we're onto the category specific questions. I know I'm really racing through these, but they are pretty, well, we think they're really obvious, and we've tried to make them this year that the questions are really explicit to help you get through them. So yeah, type your questions in with Ewan or save them up. Think anything you think of and we'll ask them at the end. So in the communications area, describe some of the strategies the nominees use to improve communications, either internally or externally. So what have they done within your organisation that has improved communications within the organisation? Or externally, how have they sold your story? How have they sold what you are doing to the outside world? And you've got 100 words to do here, so you can see that this is weighted fairly heavily. Engineering. I am married to an engineer. I come from a family of engineers. I know if you give them 2 seconds, they will talk your ear off about what they do. This is what we want to know. We want to know, how has your engineer demonstrated their passion, and how have they communicated that to people within your workplace or without it? This is our brand new category we've brought in this year because we realised there was a big hole in the program. We weren't recognising these women that had gone through the glass ceiling. And we want to know how they got there. This is going to be one of the cases where you can give us a lifetime story. What have they achieved, and how have they overcome these obstacles over the course of their career? Our Indigenous company, the art category, how have they made a difference in their own community through their involvement with defence and defence industry? Okay. Defence is a world unto its own. There are particular difficulties in dealing with the department. How has the person in your legal and contracting category overcome that? Operations, again, same thing. Defence, world unto its own. What are some of the things that they've encountered within defence that wouldn't be found outside the area? Maybe security clearances, maybe difficulty of access, that sort of thing. And how did they overcome them? Tell us a story. People and culture. It's pretty self-explanatory. How have they supported and brought up the other women around in their organisation? Project management. This is the category where the judges have the most problems, I would say, generally with the nominations, because what makes a good project, and I'll come back to this later, doesn't necessarily make a good person in that project. So the project may be wildly successful and a great story in itself. That's fantastic. But what did the nominee do in that project to make it successful? How did they overcome any difficulties they faced? R&D, I would love to see a whole heap of entries in this category this year. It's where we're heading. It's not what we're doing now, it's where we're going to end up. And I want to hear what the women in this space are doing. And what were some of the tangible results of the research they've done? How did what they thought and worked on end up being of practical use out in defence and industry? This is our most popular category this year, not only with inquiries about entry, but also with our sponsors. And it has led off to a whole new awards program that we have launched, and we'll be dealing out more details later, which will be our 30 under 30 awards, which will be open to male and female people in defence and defence industry aged under 30. There will be more details out on that later. But why did they choose defence? What was so attractive for defence, and what are they doing to encourage more young women to join here? Technical trade, so the people on the tours, again, we need more young women in technical trade. We need more people taking up a trade. Right, and here we come to our 10 top tips for entry. These have come from the feedback we got from the judges last year, and by the process of revamping the questions to make them a bit better for this year. As I said, these are annual awards. Make them relevant for 2022, except in the specific cases where it looks like we're looking for lifetime achievements, particularly in that executive management category. I would say that of the nominees that didn't make it through to the finals last year, I'd say a good 50% of them fell over at this point because they were amazing women and they'd done amazing things, but not once in the whole nomination process could we see how it was relevant to the year in question. We want to know what they've done above and beyond their base position. This is the wow factor. Why did you pick this person? What makes them amazing? Saying that, Mary is amazing is not going to be enough. We want to know why. My classic example is everybody coped with COVID, and the number of entries we saw, they dealt with a team in multiple locations in multiple time zones working from home. Well, we all did. But how did they do it that made them really think that you'd done it amazingly? That's the sort of detail the judges are after, not generic feel-good statements, like into the nitty-gritty. Emphasise the achievement in defence. We're interested in what they've done in defence and defence industries. So after all the Women in Defence Awards, we had a number of nominations last year where, again, there are amazing women, but not once in the nomination did they mention defence. So they've done amazing stuff in industry, not necessarily ours. Put a lot of thought into selecting the correct category of your nominee, and make sure your nomination relates strongly back to that category. If you're not sure where your nominee fits, if you can't choose between a couple of categories or you're not sure that they're the right one for that category, give me a call and we can talk through it. And the other option is you can put a note in with your nomination to say, I'm not sure if I've put her in the right place. If not, feel free to move her. And we have done that in the past. In fact, one year nomination was moved from one category to another and that woman ended up winning that other category. But it is really important that you pick the right one. Who doesn't love a good story? We love a good backstory. We want to know what they've done in 2022 to overcome some obstacle, whether it's personal or professional, whether it's inside defence or outside defence. We love a good backstory. For example, like, was the woman the first ever to take on a role, gain qualification, or be appointed to a leadership position? Or how did she change or adapt the role she's currently in? All the nominations are fantastic role models. You nominated them, but we're looking for details. How did they do it? What did they do? Where did they volunteer? How did their volunteering relate back to defence? How does the volunteer work encourage other young women to join defence or defence industry? This is the one I talked about before with project management. A successful project doesn't necessarily make the nominee outstanding. Telling you about the project isn't, or telling the judge panel, including me, about the project is not going to help your nominee. We need to know what they did, and we get the security issues. Tell us as much as you can. And if it turns out you can't tell us a lot, tell us that you can't tell us a lot. Yeah. Notice we've got a lot of really late comers. I'm sorry about this. How did they change the workplace cultural practices to help other women? What did they do? Did they get to a workplace and discover that there was no good breastfeeding options, that the maternity or parental leave? I'm just going to mute this person. Yeah, how did they change it? How did they make it better for women and other, not even just women, better people in their workplace? What did they do? Did they implement a break policy? Did they change the maternity leave practices? Did they make it easier for somebody to return after maternity leave into a position that's never been done before? What are they doing to bring other women along with them on the ride? I'm a really firm believer, and I know we need people pioneering paths and everything like that, but I'm a really firm believer in you can't be what you can't see. So we need to hear how these women are doing that. As well as supplying supporting documents and references from superiors or bosses, we want to hear from the other women in the workplace. One of the best applications we saw last year had a reference from a subordinate who thought her boss was absolutely amazing enough to write a reference. And that had a really big impact because it meant the nominee was really well rounded. She had support from her superiors and support from the people working for her. Well, they did do it really quick. How has the mentoring had an impact on the people around them? How's the nominee done, and what has the nominee done to support them? And references from outside the community are welcome as well. So there is an option right at the end of the entry to add supporting documents, and the judges will look at it if they're wavering on whether or not the nominee deserves a place in the finals. You have a word count, so the entries need to be definitive. Instead of saying she's amazing, answer questions like, how is she amazing? What did she do that impressed you the most? And why did you pick her above anybody else? we sort of know that all these women are going to be truly amazing human beings because you've taken the time to nominate them. So we need the details. Right. Question time. Feel free to unmute yourselves, raise your hands. And Ewan, I think, has got the question list of the written questions.
Hi, Kylie. I've got a question. Thank you for that useful information. Just wondering, should the entries be written in first or third person?
It doesn't matter. We will take either.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Just looking to see if we've got any written questions in. We've got no written questions.
I have a question, if possible, please.
Yes, go for it.
How do you feel about nominations that the judging panel may have seen before?
We're perfectly fine with nominations we've seen before, but make them different. Make them different. If you've been nominated before and didn't make it through to finals, maybe go back and review what you did, bearing in mind with the tips and tricks that we've put up here. And all of these are available on the website and for you to find. Have a look at that with these in mind and see maybe if you've fallen in with some of those traps about not being detailed enough or talking about the project and not the person or not being relevant to the year. Did that answer that?
Thank you.
Anybody else? Sorry, I didn't quite hear that. Okay, we're sure there's no more questions because we can end it here and we'll let everybody get back to work if there's nothing else that you would like to know about.
I've got one more.
Yeah,
Kylie, does the experience that the nominees write about, does it have to be Australia, or is it okay if it's like New Zealand as well? Trans-Tasman?
I feel New Zealand would be okay, but it's got to be relevant to Australian defence and Australian defence industry. So, so like we did get a number of nominations last year, particularly in operations, where the women nominated had done the amazing stuff overseas, but in support of the ADF.
Yeah. Okay.
So that would be the writers because they sort of are the Australian Women in Defence Awards. So yeah. I'm happy to include New Zealand in that though, but you would have to be relevant.
Yeah, no worries.
Oh, we've got some written questions coming in. The question about the Indigenous category, question about community focus, ideally within within country, within the Indigenous community, but in general works as well. Oh, you would put a written answer in for that as well. Okay, anything? What? The questions come in?
I can ask my question. I just typed it, but I can ask it.
Yes, go for it.
Hey, Kylie. Can you nominate the same person or the same thing in two categories? I've got one, for example, that the person is a people and culture occupation, but she's also Indigenous. So her work kind of crosses both things. So it would be relevant in both categories.
You have to do two separate nominations because of the way it's structured this year. There are category specific questions this year, Christine. You may have missed that right at the beginning. So there is
I got it. Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
You got it? Yeah. So yeah, it would be two nominations and make them specific to that category. So a different, like the nomination you would put in for people and culture would be different to the sort of nomination that you would put in the Indigenous category. Yeah,
so I mean, I wouldn't make two different submissions, but the information would be kind of the same because and they would be relevant. Like, yes, they are specific questions, but they can be kind of answered with the same submission, if that makes sense, without telling you what my submission is. But
Yeah, like we can only consider the person in one category unless you put in 2 separate submissions.
Yes, so I will put in 2 separate submissions, but they will be the same information, pretty much.
Yeah, that will be
more or less.
fine. That will be fine. That will be
Okay.
fine. So just some information about how the judging works. We have 21 judges this year, and they will be sort of split into 3 groups. So one will be judging the people culturally, you know, more touchy-feely ones. There will be the people with me doing the engineering, operations, that sort of side of stuff. And there will be a 3rd category, which will be a mix of the 3. The judges will be in those in one of those 3 groups based on their personal preferences and their experience. Anybody else? Please don't be shy. Can somebody win 2 years in a row? Yes, there's no reason why. The judges actually don't necessarily look at the names of the people until we get right down to the final list of candidates. And we certainly don't go back and look to see who's won in the past. If the person has been truly amazing 2 years in a row for the same or different reasons, there is absolutely no reason why we couldn't get a repeat person. And I just had a request to remind you all that this is being recorded and transcribed, and we'll be putting it up on the website, just so you know. Anything else? Okay, if you think of anything after the end of the session, by all means, just drop me an email and I will do the best to answer the question as I can. So thank you all for your time. And hopefully we get to see lots of entries from you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thanks,
you.
Kylie.
Bye.